All right. Well, Sockface said, "Oh my God, one of the most famous football arenas in the world, Wembley Stadium. That's one of the most famous football arenas in the world." But what are they going to? Okay, and obviously they don't have to sell out Wembley Stadium to make a statement, but there's a lot of room in between getting a crowd that makes it worthwhile financially and looks good visually, and 90,000 people, which is what the thing holds. And they're obviously not going to do, you can't tell me that they're going to do what Bret Hart and the British Bulldog did in Wembley Stadium 30 years ago. So we know they're not going to have 75,000 people. So that cuts it down a little more. I'm not familiar with the current viewership of the television program in England. They say that AEW is on the equivalent in England of NBC. However, since there are, what is it, 1/8 of the number of people in the in England as there are in the United States, even if you're on network television, their viewership can't be more than or even as much as their viewership here in the United States. So I know that the UK loves the events, loves the first time thing. They don't get a regular, diet of live big budget American wrestling. But what can they possibly do in a situation like that? Can it be more than if they'd have booked? What's the big end of that H2O arena? Is that the big one in London these days? If they'd have gone to the big building indoors, can they possibly do more than that?
Well, I guess the question is, before we even guess about what matches they could book, is this the kind of event, playing on even the name of it, All In, not All Out, All In, the original event, which was the crowdfunding wrestling spectacular, where it didn't matter who Cody or the Bucks or Omega or a few other guys worked with. It was about supporting them, supporting the project, supporting the idea,
Yeah.
flying in from around the world to support
we mentioned that. Some people bought tickets even if they couldn't go because they knew it was the boys doing it themselves. And I said, how long is that going to last before Tony becomes the establishment? Because he's richer than everybody, right? So how long is that going to last? This is different in that there is a company now, and people, for lack of a better term, they know what they're going to get and they know who's getting it. They know that Tony has more money than they ever will see in their entire life. So they're not technically supporting the wrestlers themselves that are taking a risk and putting this on, but they are supporting the first time event, the big, the stadium thing. Let's make some kind of history here. But they at the same time, it's not, oh my God, we got to help these guys or their lives will be over, because Tony can afford to fucking rent this thing for a birthday party.
But the question becomes, to go to that point, is this something where before anything's announced, there will be, I think I read, and I haven't checked up on everything because we're recording pretty early today, they're reporting that 25,000 people are on the waiting list to buy tickets. So we don't know how many are brokers, how many are people, but that's how many you could sell to get in the door right away. The question becomes, how many more people are going to want to support this?
Yeah.
This big event, fly in, make it a few days. There's going to be a Rampage and a Dynamite at some point too that weekend. And Swami's going once again.
Well, and I can believe they would sell 25,000 based on the landmark nature of it at the start. And I think, it might be a slog after that unless they come up with, because we've said it before, sometimes you have a match that needs a stadium. Sometimes you got a stadium that needs a match. And now they've got a stadium that needs a match. They have one built-in match that they could have that and especially because the UK, as we mentioned, they're even a bigger percentage of the smart fans. And I've been there and seen it. They would know exactly what the EVPs against Punk and FTR. That would be the biggest money match they could put in an international setting. But that's obviously probably not going to happen, or it would have happened by now. So they need Punk back with a stadium in England where, and again, the WWE at various points has been hotter there than it was here. And he hasn't worked in talk about not being in Chicago in 7 years or whatever. How long's it been since he's been to London? So, but even Punk, without that built-in knowledge of what went on and him somehow facing the EVPs or whatever, and then going to settle things in the ring, just with Punk on the card against anybody else, who do they have named Punk and Danielson? You know, damn, I'm trying to think.
2 questions about this. Before I even get to the next one, if there is a world where you can get Punk and FTR, let's say, because it all makes sense, versus the Bucks and Omega, is it worth doing that match for your debut London Stadium show, or is that a match that should be in America and could be promoted bigger here?
If I had made the fucking move just because I was goddamn pissed off about what the WWE was doing for WrestleMania, if I made the move to rent a 90,000 seat stadium, I would get my hottest match and put it in the main event of that particular card, because if you don't use it there, where the fuck else you ever going to use it? And whether Tony or his EVPs or anybody in the company wants to admit it or not, they've got names they can write down against each other. But the only serious money match that they have putting anybody together on their roster is Punk and somebody, if not FTR, somebody against the fucking guys that he got in a shoot with. If anybody thinks anything else, then they're delusional.
Well, let me ask you this. If we did it to compare it to what the WWE just did with the Bloodline, would it work if it was a Punk versus Omega and FTR versus the Bucks?
It might work there as well. It wouldn't be Punk interacting with all of the people that he took down or stretched or bit or blacked-eyed or punched or whatever. Maybe we could have Punk and Ace Steel against fucking Olivier and Callis. But you could, I mean, again, FTR and the Bucks, we never got to see the rubber match because the fucking Buckaroos, simped out on it. They fucking put their tail between their legs and made their own belts and got away from FTR. So they didn't have to do the rubber match.
So again, you're trying to excite fans to get them to fly to London, more than likely, unless you think you're going to draw all this just from British fans. You're trying to get fans excited for this. If you're
this is the only time this is going to happen. We're going to let these four opposing entities settle their issues. You never got a rubber match between the Buckaroos and FTR. Well, now you will. And the main event, and by that point, I don't know what you're doing with the fucking title, but it doesn't really need the goddamn belt. And CM Punk is going to goddamn have things out in a EVP on a pole match or whatever with Twinkle Toes McFingerbang. Except really, the best interaction in the shoot was between Punk and both of the Buckaroos. And
no, Omega and Ace Steel. So Punk comes out with Ace Steel. They could do something from like Rocky V, and no. Well, but other than Omega or a 6-man match with the Bucks, and Matt Jackson's hurt right now, and I don't know the status of his injury, if that does anything to affect what his availability in August.
He's hurt, as they used to say. He's got a bad case of cowarditis.
But if he's hurt, that makes Nick Jackson available as a single, so maybe there's something there, like a chair match. Who could throw the chair at the other guy's face first?
Well, but then the sum of the Buckaroo quit it.
Sockeye Buck versus CM Punk. Sign it. Just
tie him to the fucking wall and put a red fucking target strips around him and see who can chuck the chair right into the face. With the sum of the Buckaroo's parts is greater than the individual parts. If you advertise one buck, it's like having one midget. You got nothing.
Beyond that, though, beyond Punk working with Omega or the Bucks or some variation of that, Punk Moxley. I don't think anyone wants to see that again, including the two guys that I just named that were in the match. Punk Jericho. That's exactly what Jericho's going to fucking pitch. I guarantee it. He's going to be done with Adam Cole by then.
Yeah.
Hey, let's do business, Punk. Hey, everyone knows what I think of you. Everyone knows what you think of me. Let's do business. And you know what? If it was done right, it could be something. But to be done right, Chris Jericho could have no say in the creative whatsoever. And it has to be taken away from him and his silliness.
So then your prediction is basically if they can sweet talk Punk into doing him the favor of coming back, that you think that Jericho would probably try to angle to work with him because he'd be the star. But if not, then you think that Jericho's trying to angle to work with Olivier because he'd be the best choice left over.
Chris Jericho's the smartest guy there politically. He always plays the right hand for Chris Jericho, and he knows he has Tony in his pocket. Chris Jericho is going to be done with Adam Cole by August. He's going to need the hot guy to work with. If Punk's back in that company, and based on everything we know about their characters, if the EVPs won't do business with them, right away you're capping who he can work with. Jericho will more than likely be the first one willing to do it. Tony will more than likely be willing to embrace that. But if I was CM Punk, I would say Chris Jericho could have no say in the creative. It's not going to be silly. It's not going to be any of his shit. But still, I don't know if that's...
Well, besides that, then who calls the finish? Because you think Jericho's going to say, and then he can beat me. Fuck, he'll probably be in Tony's ear like, he can do some penance by doing a job for me, and that way all the other boys it'll take the heat off of him with them. That'd be a good idea, wouldn't it?
That'll be the pitch. It'll be, I could help sell him to the locker room. But then also it's going to be Punk's going to have to deal with Daniel Garcia and Hager. The problem is
there's a lot of the locker room that fucking needs Jericho sold to him. Because they see what's fucking going on with him.
You know, to speak about Wembley and other potential matches, things that are out there, there are two low-hanging fruit I could think of. I don't know how they would do his draws, but if you need things that could be draws, they may be things to latch onto. A Goldberg retirement match, and Sting's already said he's going to have a retirement match this year. A Sting retirement match. Would those two things be big draws for Wembley in your eyes?
Either one, yes. I think Goldberg probably more because at some point, I'm not sure that, or at some level, I'm not sure that everybody really buys the retirement, as ever being real. But if Goldberg is actually going to be there live in person, whether it's his last match or not, everybody knows it could be the last one of either one of these guys at their age. But Sting's been around, Goldberg hasn't. I think Goldberg would be bigger.
There's something also for Jericho. A potential opponent for Goldberg in his retirement match. You want to do business? There's the business to do.
He can say, yeah, if we can't capitalize on the shoot that Punk and the EVPs have, let's capitalize on the shoot that I had with Goldberg. Nobody wants to capitalize on shoots anymore. That used to be the whole thing the business was revolving around.
I mean, the other option, too, I guess if we're talking about the Bucks and Omega and that whole crew, if this thing with the BCC is still going until then, maybe that's a Wembley Stadium Stampede or a War Games or something.
No. Speaking of the BBC, should we move on to their segment of the program?
No, let's keep guessing about matches that could be at Wembley.